All right, that was Black Sabbath with a song called Superstars. Before that, we heard another snippet from the 1948 version of Joan of Arc. Ingrid Bergman, ready for the fire. And we started the set with Queens of the Stone Age doing Burn the Witch. Welcome back to God Rock Radio. I'm Jack the Agnostic Garcia. And we left off examining Joan of Arc's trial and execution. Well, now we're going to get into some of the film adaptations of Joan's amazing story. We're going to start with the silent or nitrate era. Let's start with Joan the Woman. This is 1916, directed by Cecil B. DeMille, and stars Geraldine Farrar as Joan. Now, this is the famed director's first real historical epic. He makes Carmen in 1915, a year before this film, but that's not quite the same thing. Now, in this film, a World War I British officer whose name is Hobarth Bosworth, I believe, falls asleep and dreams of the life of Joan of Arc. Now, this is the first film to use Henschel two-tone color process for certain sequences. Now, DeMille's visual style in this movie ignites the imagination. There's heavy dramatic lighting, deep shadows. There's great art direction and gigantic sets. This is an interesting early effort by the melodramatic filmmaker. All right, let's move on to The Passion of Joan of Arc. This is 1928. It's directed by Carl Theodor Dreyer. This is a distinctly international production. It's a Danish director, a German production team, a Russian and French crew. Dreyer essentially ignores all the battlefield dramatics, and the film is confined to Joan in her cell at the trial on the way to the stake. Now, this film has a very, very large budget for what is essentially an avant-garde or experimental film. It's constructed mainly of close-ups of faces, with occasional tracking shots and rare glimpses of the background and very impressive sets, actually. Now, the editing in this film is extremely important. It's superb, concise, and it's linked to the pattern of questioning. The patterns of questioning are essentially close-ups that are intercut with the titles. Maria Falconetti, the Corsican actress, who I believe never made another film, gives a magnetic performance. She has a remarkably expressive upturned face with closely cropped hair. Now, as I mentioned, the editing is amazing in this film. It's compelling, startling. Joan is looking up to her judges. The judges are above her, and she's below, face to look up at them. Well, this editing certainly suggests that Joan is looking up to God, her true judge. Now, this is a really, really great movie that was essentially lost for decades and reconstructed by the director Carl Theodor Dreyer from outtakes around 1965 or so. Many years after it was originally made. All right, let's move on to Joan of Arc. This is 1948, directed by Victor Fleming. This stars Ingrid Bergman as Joan, and she's virtually radiant as Joan. This is a great performance. Ingrid is the Joan for the ages. She played the role on Broadway. This film is based on Maxwell Anderson's play. All right, now. It's a touching, devout look at the life of Joan. There's great sets, nice photography. It's an epic on a grand scale, but there's too much talk. Remember, it's based on a play, and too little action. There's not enough spectacle to balance the talky sequences. All right, now, as I mentioned, she played the role on Broadway, and she is amazing. Ingrid Bergman's amazing as Joan of Arc. Now, shortly after the release of the film, her scandal, her child out of wedlock scandal with director Roberto Rossellini hits. Now, pre-scandal, the movie does really good box office, and Ingrid Bergman is given an Oscar nomination. But post-scandal, the film virtually disappears for years. After all, Ingrid is a marked woman. She's had a child out of wedlock, and she's playing a saint. As I mentioned, the film has some great moments, but it's too pretty, too Hollywood, too glamorized. Now, the original length of the movie was actually almost 2.5 hours, but it was cut down in some prints to 100 minutes. All right, let's move on to Saint Joan. This is 1957, directed by Otto Preminger. This is a pretty ambitious opus. It's a big-scale filming with good acting. It's based on George Bernard Shaw's play, and the script is by the great novelist Graham Greene. There's actually a nationwide talent hunt for the movie. There's 18,000 applicants between the ages of 16 and 22 years old. Well, the leading actress, the winner, Jean Seberg, is announced on the Ed Sullivan Show. Now, Seberg is inexperienced. It's a very, very demanding role, and she's not yet ready for the part. But Seberg shows amazing promise as an actress. She's really, really good, considering she never did anything but high school theater. She proves she's a great actress just 2 years later in Breathless, 1959, directed by Godard. Now, Richard Widmark, who plays the Dauphin in this film, steals the movie in a clown-like comic performance that is very much out of character. He usually plays a hard-bitten guy, a hard-boiled guy, or a villain. Now, this movie was a big, big box office bust. It suffered savage reviews, and the movie landed with a very, very loud thud. But the movie's reputation has improved with time. It's actually a pretty good film, so check it out. All right, let's move on to The Trial of Joan of Arc. This is 1962. It's directed by Robert Bresson. This is a French movie. It's essentially the most historically accurate film. The actual transcripts of the trial are the dialogue. We hear the actual words out of Joan's mouth. The film is structured around the historical record. Now, Florence DeLay plays Joan. There's a powerful, raw intensity to the film. There's stark, dark photography. And Bresson likes realism. He uses non-professional actors. The director's intent in this film is suffering in spare strokes, a penetration of Joan's inner state. Essentially, a solitary individual's struggle to survive a spiritual and physical ordeal. Now, Bresson was a painter who turned into a filmmaker, but he's a great movie maker, but he's not very prolific. He only creates 13 films in 50 years. I highly recommend you see this movie. It is shown occasionally on cable television, so please check it out. All right, let's get to a more contemporary version of the Joan of Arc story. This is The Messenger, 1999, which is directed by Luc Besson. This movie leans heavily on vivid, in-your-face, gory battle scenes and spectacle. Now, Joan is played by Mila Jovovich in an eye-popping, vibrant performance. The film brings up questions. It's a little different, takes a different spin than the typical Joan of Arc movie. As I mentioned, it brings up questions. Is Joan divinely inspired or simply having schizophrenic hallucinations? For example, in the movie, Joan sees her sister murdered and raped. I repeat, murdered and raped, in that order by the English. Well, her mind snaps, and she begins to hear heavenly voices. Throughout the movie, Joan questions herself and her own sanity. The first half of this film is brilliant. It drags a little bit towards the end, but it's certainly worth seeing. I wish I had more time to get... There are several other adaptations, but I felt these were the most important. All right. Wow, what a journey for Joan and for us. An amazing, courageous woman who certainly deserved her sainthood. All right.